All right, we're going to head, excuse me, we're going to go ahead and get started. I can't talk with a mask on, so I apologize. We appreciate everybody coming out tonight to the Thursday, January 20th Planning Commission meeting for Harriman City. We will go ahead and begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, and Joe Rummel will be leading us that. If you come forward.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. It's good to have more people here to hear that rounding pledge for us. Thank you. We do have a full quorum tonight. Just ask if there's any conflicts of interest from the Planning Commission on any of the agendas for tonight. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 2.4, which is the approval of the minutes for our December 2nd Planning Commission meeting. Any discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 2.4, approval of minutes for December 2nd, 2021 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Heather and a second by Forrest. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that is approved. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3, which is legislative items. Each one of these items are on for public hearing, so I would like to go ahead and read in the public comment and policy and procedure for our public comment period. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form, and the forms are in the back there, and present it to Wendy Thorpe up here, our deputy recorder. In general, I will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. Public hearing comments may be substituted by emailing the recorder as well, or by visiting harriman.org also, where there is a link to fill out the form. And we have received a number of those from individuals already, and we have reviewed those as a planning commission, and they will be part of the record, but we will not read them in tonight. But note that any of the comments that we received as of around 3 o'clock or so today, we have seen and reviewed as well, so we appreciate that. So you're welcome to comment again, but it's already part of the record. So with that, we will move on to item 3.1, which is a recommendation of approval to amend the South Hills Master Development Agreement. And I'll just say, Clint, get your soft shoes on. We're going to be standing.
Yeah. Comfortable, right?
Yep.
Okay. As always, it's good to be before the commission tonight. This first item is a very simple request regarding the South Hills Development MDA. Each of these MDA, so the location of this is just along the Mountain View corridor, where Rio Vista Parkway intersects the corridor there. The future site of Lee's Marketplace and several other businesses. As part of the existing MDA, they have a current land use plan, which is in the exhibits. And what they're proposing to do is to amend the plan before you tonight, in specific the area that's highlighted there with the red polka dots. If you'll see, there's 2 pods, pod 35 and 39. Each of those has a little brown section. That represents a residential development that was supposed to take place. All they're doing in their request is consolidating those 2 residential areas into pod 35. The number of residential units allowed still stays the same, so you're just moving that density into one area. This opens up the rest of the project for more commercial development as well. And this is the so in terms of compliance, this is the East Area General Plan. And then again, this red polka dotted area is kind of where we're looking at in terms of location. And you'll see that off to the side of that you'll have that middle section, which is red, that's slated to be commercial, and then off to the side, you have that purple, which is a mixed use, which supports high density, which is where this new development will be taking place. So it is in compliance with the East Area General Plan. Our recommendation is to approve the new land use map for the South Hills development as part of Exhibit C. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, is the applicant here for this one? Is there anything additional you'd like to come up and present before the Planning Commission? Any additional items? Go ahead and state your name as well for the record.
Yeah, I'm Alex Dahlstrom on behalf of the Wasatch Group. Nothing really else. I think that he covered it well.
Okay.
Simple request, just consolidating that density. So we're really excited about this project and looking forward to getting moving on it. So
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time as well. All right, with that, as I mentioned, this is open for a public hearing, so if there's anyone that would like to come up and present any comments, I will go ahead and open the public hearing at this time on this item. Just, again, for just this particular item. Okay, seeing no comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Any discussion from Planning Commission on this?
So this would increase our commercial area by consolidating these two lots. So
That's correct.
I support doing that.
Yeah, and again, maybe just for the benefit of those in the audience as well, all of these legislative items, as a planning commission, we vote on them one way or another, but the final decision will be by the city council. So whatever recommendations we make today will be going back to the city council, and they will have the ultimate say on these. So these are just recommendations from the council. So, so thank you, Heather. Any other comments or discussion?
I agree with the consolidation and getting more commercial out of this area, and where it's located makes sense.
Okay. Sounds like I'm ready for hear a motion then. There's no other discussions.
Was there any staff recommendations for this?
This step, there was not on this particular one. Okay, I thought there was.
Just recommend
Yeah,
Okay.
proposed.
Oh, okay.
they do. Oh, you mean, yeah,
Okay.
thumbs up there. No other items, correct?
Okay. So I'll make a motion for item 3.1, a recommendation of approval to amend the South Hills Master Development Agreement to modify the land use designation in pods 35 and 39 at approximately Rio Vista and Mountain View corridor.
I'll second that.
Great. We have a motion by Heather and a second by Brody. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Jackson?
Yes.
Great. That unanimously passes and goes on to City Council for recommendation of approval. Clint, item 3.2.
Okay. So this next request is in concert with the last one. So with the land use map being amended to allow for these changes, the next part of this process is to amend the zoning map for the area. In terms of consideration, we're looking at compliance with the East Area General Plan. As I mentioned before, the plan does show for multiple mixed use, which supports high-density housing, which would support the rezone for that particular area to the RM zone. It's in character with the surrounding development, where it's surrounded by commercial and other high-density residential. And looking at adverse effects on the property, it does buffer the adjacent residential from the commercial. And then in terms of being able to be serviced, in speaking with our engineering department, this is an area that we'll be able to service whether it's commercial or high density, so there's no concerns there. Again, this is the area that we're looking at, and I kind of went through the compliance issue. This is the existing zoning. So there's this central area that's zoned as C2 right now, and then the outliers on each side of that C2 have some MU2 is what it currently is zoned. And then the proposed zoning will change all of that, so you'll have those two outliers will become C2, which is commercial, and then the RM is the high-density housing that will that consolidates those two land use areas into the kind of that western portion of the property for the development of that apartment complex there. These are just some conceptual plans for the Academy Terrace Apartments. It's not part of the rezone request or anything like that, and it's not part of our approval or consideration. These are just some conceptual drawings they provided us thus far. We'll be working with them more as the project comes into fruition. So, in terms of recommendation, this request does involve several different zone amendments. Essentially, you're ending up with this zoning map here, these zoning designations. So, that being said, we do support the proposed rezone and recommend approval to the City Council. Are there any questions for me on this one?
Thank you. Any other comments from you're good. All right, very good. Again, this is a recommendation for zone change for this particular item. And again, it is up for a public hearing. So at this time, I will open up the public hearing for any discussion or comments on the proposed zoning change. Okay. Come on up, state your name for the record. Again, this is for this particular item on the agenda, not any other items coming up.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
126 South and Mountain, or
No,
Main Street.
No, we're not on that one yet. Yep, we'll be getting to that one, sir. Yep, thank you. All right, seeing no comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing for this particular item. Any discussion from the commission? Pretty straightforward.
I think makes sense, yeah, where it's located. I'll make a recommendation with staff's recommendation as well to approve to amend the Harriman City official zoning map for the following property at 4001 West Bruin View Drive.
You could probably just say item 3.2 and that would be
Yeah,
sufficient.
item
for that.
3.2.
Yeah.
I make a recommendation for approval.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Brody and a second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yeah.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Jackson?
Yes.
All right, go ahead. That unanimously passes. Recommendation for approval again to Harriman City Council. We'll go ahead and move on to item 3.3, recommendation of approval to amend the general plan. Clint, once more.
All right, so I'm assuming that the folks here behind me are mostly interested to hear about this project, or they're just here for a long night. So this is a general land use amendment for a couple of different properties along 126 South. The applicant is Harriman 73 Partners, and Larry Mylar with that group is here to represent them tonight. So in terms of where the vicinity, this is where the project is taking place, just here to the north of us on 123 or 126 South. As I mentioned, there are a couple of properties included in this general plan land use change. The first one is 5452 West on Harriman Boulevard. The second one is 5078 West along 12560 is what the address was on the application. So things that we're looking at tonight in terms of consideration for this item is how the request fits in with the general plan and how it complies with our zoning ordinance. So in terms of amending the land use from commercial, well, from commercial to, so there's a couple of different properties involved. We'll talk about this first one here at 5452. That request is going from, currently it's a commercial land use designation. The applicant is requesting for a medium density residential designation, which allows up to 8 units per acre. The second piece further to the east, the piece along 12560, that piece is currently commercial as well, and it's being proposed to change to the high-density residential, which allows up to 20 units per acre. A conceptual plan has been provided for the 5452 West property. This has been this is an update. I'm not sure if this is what was shown to the residents, but this is an update the applicant provided at a meeting to city staff last week. It's been included in the report as well. Again, the concept is not what we're reviewing tonight. It's basically just an idea of how this property could develop. It's purely conceptual and should not be part of the consideration. When this, if the rezoning takes place and the site does get developed, the applicant will come back to the city, work with staff, and at that time we will work with them on site layout and bring that before the commission again. So in terms of zoning compliance for the 5452 West Harriman Boulevard, this is what we've called the Crescent piece, just based on its shape. These are the considerations: is does it promote the public interest? One of the benefits is the potential removal of contaminated soil. We know that this property has a large amount of contaminated soil on it. There is a large berm there right now that exists, and with any type of development, whether it be commercial or residential, a total complete soils report will need to be completed and provided to the city, and that will be in terms of what's there, how they're going to move it, where they're going to move it to, all of these types of processes. But having the soils removed from the site would be a benefit to the city in terms of public interest and health. Allowing additional housing to take place on the site does provide for life cycle housing, which is one of the considerations in the general plan. These could be looked at as potential starter homes, or for folks that are older that don't have a large family anymore, and large need for that. That can take place as well on the property. In terms of how it can serve as a property value, it does place residential next to residential. There is currently a vinyl fence barrier between the property to the north. The property to the east along Solomir, there's no physical boundary. The properties are open to each other. In terms of vehicular or traffic issues, there's no vehicular access from this property into adjacent properties that are to the north. There would be some additional congestion that takes place along Harriman Boulevard, but that street is designed to handle that kind of congestion. In our recommendation, we have here to buffer the existing residential by 30 feet. And as I mentioned in our pre-meeting before, I would probably change that recommendation to 25 feet. That's typically what a rear yard in a residential setting would be, is 25 feet and not the 30 feet. So that's one change and that's not necessarily part of a zoning condition, but as we have been in conversations with the applicant, they are proposing to develop a master development agreement, and the site design and layout, a lot of those issues can and will be handled in that master development agreement with the applicant at a later time. But these are recommendations that we feel as a staff should be included into that. And then another one of those recommendations, and this is based off of a lot of the concerns we heard from adjacent neighbors. Currently, any residential zone allows for a 35-foot height maximum. And so we would just request that same standard be implemented in any type of development that takes place if this property were rezoned to a commercial use. In terms of, so it avoids incompatible development. As I mentioned before, it does place residential next to residential, and it promotes the general welfare. And then again, this goes back to just allowing additional housing in the city for folks to relocate. We know that we're facing a housing crisis statewide and probably throughout the West in general, but this would help satisfy some of those housing needs. Now to speak to the property to the east, 5078 West, 12560. So this is going from commercial, or being requested to go from commercial to high-density residential. Again, it does provide that life cycle housing. In terms of conserving property value, to the north of this, there is some higher density housing. It maybe not as high as this might propose to be. We don't have any conceptual designs, or I haven't been any conversations with the applicant in terms of what they're proposing in terms of density on this site. There's no vehicular access that would bleed up to the north as well. This would all be accessed off of Harriman Main Street. And then one of the concerns from staff is that it would decrease the commercial viability of an adjacent commercial lot, which is just to the west of the site. The applicant has come in. We do have an application for the property just to the south of this, just south of that yellow square. They have requested a rezone to the C2 zone, and that will be considered at a later date. But that will become before the commission as well, and will be noticed to the neighborhood. In terms of avoiding incompatible development, as I mentioned before, it is adjacent to residential to the north. The residential next to the commercial on other side. So if this were to change to high-density residential, it would, on that western portion, it would essentially box that in on 3 sides, where they'd be looking at additional development requirements in terms of setback, screening. It would affect the access to and through that entire site as it's designed now. And then in terms of promoting the general welfare, it does increase, that housing option. Both of these properties now are in the current general plan. They exist as commercial, as well as in the draft general plan, which we've been working with residents and the council and commission on for the last year or so. In the draft general plan, it designates it as a neighborhood commercial, which is maybe potentially a lower intensity than a commercial use as it is now. But that's just in terms of compliance with the current and the draft general plans. Effect on orderly development. This is one of the things that we consider in terms of how development takes place. So we feel like the future commercial viability of the site is impacted with this adjacent development. So if this site were to take place and go to a high-density residential, the viability of that other property developing commercially would be impacted. And again, it does increase the housing options for future residents. There have been several neighborhood concerns that we have seen through email. We do have the notes from the neighborhood meeting that was held on the 20th of December. And these are outlining some of those concerns, and I know that the community is here to speak on behalf of these concerns. There may be more or other concerns that they'd like to bring up as well. In terms of options for action, these are what the staff has outlined. You could provide a separate action for each property, and then just basing your determination on compliance with the general plan, draft general plan, and the zoning policies of the city, your approval or denial, or if you would like to continue this item to the future, that's also a possibility as well. So are there any questions or concerns for me on this item?
Any questions for Clint?
What is the maximum height for commercial, and what is the maximum height for high density?
The RM zone, if I'm not mistaken, I think that is subject to a development plan, so an MDA would establish that. The commercial zone, so a C1 zone is limited to 35 feet. As it's proposed now, or as it's designated now, it could be rezoned to a C2 zone, and a C2 zone would allow up to 45 feet in height for development.
And what MDA is this going to be included with?
So this will be a new MDA that we'll begin working with the applicant here, based off of the discussions and decisions of the city. Moving forward, we'll be talking with the applicant, and that MDA will be discussed with the city, then brought to the commission and council for final consideration. For
the benefit of the audience, what is an MDA?
An MDA is just that master development agreement. So, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
A master development agreement looks at a large piece of property and how it potentially could develop. They might want to make some alterations to ordinances that exist in the city. The idea is that the city gives something, but the city gets something in return: better design, better quality, a better site layout, those types of things. These have been done. We have several MDAs in the city, or master development agreements in the city, And so this would just kind of follow suit. And like I said, we'd be working with the applicant directly, the staff would be, and I think council and commission, or
Thank you.
the council would as well.
So this, just to be clear, this won't be attached to the Auto Mall MDA?
It'll be part of the Auto Mall MDA.
It'll
but
be
it's
an
separate
amendment?
from- What's that?
Will it be an amendment to the Automall or a new? Don't know.
Not have an MDA for
There
the
isn't one.
Auto Mall.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Excuse me.
So this was a new MDA that would encompass everything.
Everything. Gotcha. Okay.
And so just another item I want to be clear on. So this is a general plan recommendation. So the general plan basically says what kinds of zones can take place on this property. Currently, as I mentioned, it's designated as a commercial site. Both of them, both properties are. And so the applicant would just be saying, okay, we want to use this differently from commercial. We want to do residential. And one would support the medium density residential for that crescent shaped piece. And then for that piece further to the east would be a high density residential. So after this item, we'll also go, depending on the conversations, we'll also go into depth on the rezones for both of those pieces.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Clint. Mike?
There is just a lot to remember in our
Yes.
zoning ordinance. I looked up the RM zone height. It is 35 feet for the main building in the RM zone. But so many of our RM zones are also parts of planned developments or MDAs, and as Clint mentioned, there is a potential of modification of those heights through the MDAs, so.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here? Would you like to present any other information to the commission?
I'm happy to answer any
State your name.
questions.
Sorry, state your name,
Larry
please.
Myler.
Thank you,
Yes,
Larry.
thank you.
Yeah.
I could give some general overview if you'd like, and then answer any questions you have. Would that be a good way to go?
Yeah, if there's anything additional you want to bring up
Yeah.
from what Clint, because again, there's multiple items tonight, maybe just real quick for the audience. This is, again, just to look at the general plan. There'll be zoning discussions coming up after this, so specifically to the general plan.
And I'm happy to talk more about
Yeah.
the zoning when that comes up. But just to give some context for the commission and neighbors and everyone who's here tonight, this is, these two requests for general plan amendment and then the follow-on zone changes are not done in a vacuum. They're part of an overall MDA, Master Development Agreement, as has been mentioned. And so we're viewing it as one project, and I think because we're looking at them in isolation, it's hard to see the big picture. We were asked to come in a few years ago by the city and help purchase land and preserve it for the auto mall and assemble it, and so we have done so to date, spending $26 million on land acquisition. Early on in that process, we worked with the city to get under contract this Crescent piece, this 15-acre piece, and also to talk about the future of this piece and the other piece just west of Maine. So it's all kind of a part of a bigger deal reflected by the Master Development Agreement, which is coming for the overall deal with the auto mall. If you look at it as one project, just as a point of curiosity, the density, the residential density on this 100 acres, not just the 15 and the 6.5 that we're looking at tonight, just to give perspective, is a 2.4 units per acre of residential. The rest of it is all commercial, and we're trying to make it as much tax-generating commercial as we can. So if you go east of Main Street and look at the frontage on 126, you've noted that the garage grill is being built there. That will create tax, sales tax. And we also have the car wash that's being built on the kind of just near Main Street on that frontage. But just so everyone can understand the things that are coming, we're trying to get restaurants to come in. So Seven Brothers Gourmet Hamburgers is coming. Quench It, like a Sodalicious kind of thing, is coming. And we also have Trey, what? Trey here? Yep. Who else have we got coming in? Yeah. Waffle Love coming. And is there any other restaurants that we can talk about yet? Zeppi's. So that's an ice cream. So we've talked to a lot of people here, and we're trying to bring in the right kinds of uses. So just behind those, or north of those C2 uses, the auto mall begins, and it runs all the way up to where Miller Crossing will come, and perhaps north of Miller Crossing, we're not quite sure. But we've got a lease in place for one dealership, and we have a purchase contract in place for another dealership. They want to buy the land. So the auto dealership is moving, and it's been slow. And one of the big barriers to that was the 7 acres, the big detention basin that UDOT has owned. And until December 17th, just last month, we frankly didn't have an auto mall because UDOT had that, and the city had not been able to get it. But we were able to work a trade with another property in Saratoga Springs that UDOT needed, and we now have that deal in place. So probably next month, those deeds will transfer, and we'll actually have consolidated the auto mall land. So this is a broader picture, and of course, tonight we're here to talk about these two pieces. Happy to do that more specifically as we get into zoning, but there's the general context. Any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, and you will have an opportunity at the completion of the public hearing if you'd like to come back and present any or discuss anything that may come about. So thank you, Larry. Appreciate your time. Maybe there's been a few folks that have come in since I read the instructions, just a quick summary. Again, we've received a lot of comments already. We appreciate that prior to the meeting. So if you provided a comment prior to 3 o'clock today, those comments have been read and will be a part of the meeting minutes for tonight's meeting, and will be also included in whatever goes forward to the City Council. So tonight, you will be given 3 minutes again for an individual, and 5 minutes if you're representing a group of individuals. We've received a lot of comments, and I appreciate all the comments, we all do. But as you do come up and provide comments, let's not pile on to existing comments that may have been given. Provide us maybe some new information. We haven't made any decision. This is, again, a recommendation that will go before the City Council. So we don't need to necessarily pile on comment after comment, but we do want to hear what you have to say. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing and invite you to come forward. So go ahead and just state your name. And again, you'll need to provide a written comment as well, and provide that as well.
Hi, my name is Jared Cruz, and I actually live on the homes on Iron King Drive. So the Crescent piece development, that's directly going to impact me and all of my neighbors. And so my comments here represent those in attendance who live in that neighborhood, as well as those who live on my street and throughout the Miller Crossing community. I have talked to many of the residents in our neighborhood, and we all would not mind residential homes behind us, but the density of the plan presented by Larry Myler, we all agree is way too high. We would like to see the density at least lowered to match our community, or at least come close to it. If the density can't be lowered, then we would all rather have the lands behind us stay zoned as commercial until a better plan comes along. There should be no need to rush getting something on the land if it is not what the city wants and it is not what we as residents want. We will live with the consequences of whatever the developer does with the land behind us. If his proposed land plan is approved, he will make his money and walk away, and we as residents will have to face the consequences for years to come. I just want to make it clear that our neighborhood is not against development. Development is actually good and helps our city grow and provides the services we all need. We just want responsible development. The plan that Larry has proposed is not responsible and is simply packing in far too many homes than what makes sense for the proposed land. Also, the 3-story homes in his proposed plan will not match the surrounding communities, and we all would prefer only 2-story homes on that land, so 2-story homes throughout the entire community. In addition, Larry's plans for the apartments on the garden plots lot, the other development, will be detrimental to the city because that is prime commercial land. And it's because it's so close to Mountain View Corridor. So we need all the commercial we can get in our city, and we just don't have enough. There's too much residential in Harriman. We need more. Overall, we would like to see the density of this plan lowered behind the Crescent proposed piece. If that can't be done, we would rather have the zone behind the homes on Iron King Drive stay as commercial until a better plan comes along. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mara Danes. I currently teach at Harriman Elementary. I've been there 14 years, and I also live by the apartments that want to be built, and I really don't want that. But one thing I want to talk about is the impact that all this building has on our school systems here. In 10 years, my Harriman Elementary has been rezoned or reorganized 4 times. We're going to go through our 4th one this coming new school year. It's a lot. There's a lot of kids. We don't have enough teachers that want to teach. We don't have enough services for those schools. So please keep that in mind as well when you're wanting to change commercial to residential, because we just don't have that infrastructure. Coming last week with the mayor and one of the councilmen, it was interesting to hear what services we really don't have here in Harriman and what we lack. So just please keep that in mind. I'm kind of representing the teachers. We talked about this a lot. A lot of us do live here in Harriman, and it really does affect our job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My name's Joe Rummel, and thank you for letting me address your council, or the group here at Planning and Zone Commission. I appreciate you guys. What I want to point out, and I think you guys have everybody's already realized this, and I know we need housing. I get it. I've been looking for a house for a year plus now, okay? Houses in Harriman, a regular house is going for $800,000. I get it, okay? But I think what we need to do too is we need to be careful, because with Olympia Hills coming, and we know it's coming now, it's done, 6,900 homes. Here's our option now. We either put the commercial right here where we're at, where you guys, prior planning commissions and other people have already set it up. We put the commercial and leave it here, or those people from Olympia Hills drive right by us and go down into Riverton, where they are doing a lot of commercial right on our borders. So that's something I ask you guys to think about. You know, if you want to think long-term, that's what we got to think about, is where do we want them 6,900 homes from Olympia Hills driving through or stopping off? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is David Blake. I'm a live in Midas Creek Villas. I think that the commission is set with a unique problem here. One of the landowners in this is Harriman City itself, and therefore it is looking for the best thing that it can get. But we are also owners in Harriman City, and Harriman City ought to not have an undue influence about what goes on in the properties that they own. I think that I would speak against the change in the general plan. Harriman City acquired this property. Specifically, I'm speaking to as the 15.49 acres that Harriman City owns. Harriman City acquired this property when they developed the extension of 126 South. At that time, I believe that's when the berm was created. That was part of the development of which Harriman City gathered. I don't think that we ought to unduly provide opportunities to proposed landowners or land buyers for here. If Harriman City needs to improve that property, we as property owners and as members of Harriman City ought to pay for it and increase the value of that property. I don't think that the properties should be residential. We have enough residential and high density around where I live, and around there is plenty. We do need more commercial. We do need a plan that is developed. And I would think that we should be very careful as citizens of Harriman that we don't unduly affect others. And Harriman has a real problem in the fact that it owns the property and has a desire to gain money from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh boy, I didn't plan to do this. I'm Fern Cloward. I just have a couple of things that's been going through my mind. Number one, I'm old, so I'm probably only going to live in Harriman maybe, if I'm really lucky, another 10 years. But I'm looking forward to my grandchildren. They want to be able to come out this way, but think of the reputation that certain areas in this valley has. They don't want to, and I'm not putting down, I guess I am putting down Kearns. At one time, that was the good place to go, Now there's a lot of bad things going on over there. But anyway, with this high density that we have here, very high density, my grandchildren aren't excited to come to Harriman because of that. They want to have a little bit of space that their children can play in, go and they want to be able to afford something. So I'm thinking of that. My kids, I'm thinking, number one, the reputation down the road. What do we want for Harriman in the year 2050? 2040, 2050, and what do we want for our grandchildren? Do we want them to come out here and be close to us? I think so. I wished every one of us that feel this way could stand up. I think there's really a lot of us that are here to support that we leave it as a commercial property. Thank you.
Thank you. And we hope you're around a lot longer than 10 years. Thank you.
My name is Ron Kohler. I live in Midas Creek also. I've spoken to you before, but my main concern is giving up commercial sites for residential. I know there has to be some residential sites, but myself, I'm tired of seeing 3-story apartments or townhomes or condos all over the place out here. I like to have a little space also like Fern. But my concern is on that commercial spot up on the corner of the odd-shaped piece that's by us. I'm concerned is the developer purchasing that property from Harriman if it gets approved. I've got a grandma act in with the city requesting that information. But I was concerned about if you were actually selling that piece of property to Harriman or to the developer. My second one is that piece that's down below is prime commercial property. You can see it from Mountain Corridor. You need sales tax. To be blunt, and I worked for Murray City. To be blunt, you lose money on citizens. You have to have a tax base. 95% of the money that we spend, my wife and I, is in South Jordan or Riverton. There's not much in Harriman to spend your money on. A lot of the stores are smaller. In the other cities, they have Costco, they have the bigger Smiths, and that kind of thing. We have Winco. But this is stuff that you need. You've got 2 fire stations you need to build. It would take more, almost as much as your whole sales tax money coming in to pay for one of them. And you can't do that. You've got to build it up. The more time you take to build those fire stations, the more it's going to cost. So I would just like to say that commercial piece down on the front needs to stay commercial and not residential. It's right across the street. And that would, in my estimation, would be the best thing to do. I'm not so against residential up there because you would get rid of the tainted soil and it'd be brought down to the mall and put in the holes. But 2-story is it. I know there was talk of 3-story, and high density, it needs to be broader. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Andrew Lawrence. I do have other neighbors that wanted me to speak for them, if I could have 5 minutes on the clock. So yeah, I am one of Jared's neighbors. I live on Iron King Drive as well. I understand the purpose of this meeting is to give recommendations to the council. And so I just have some recommendations that I wanted to give, and some of my neighbors had as well. So neighboring the triangle piece, I'm more for it being residential. You know, it'd be better to have residential than commercial in my mind, in my backyard. But I definitely see things that are problems with the proposed plans. Number one, there's a lot of concern of the soil contamination. It's unclear what soil studies have been done and what soil remediation plans are in place, if any. I think those things need to be done before any of these zone changes take place, not afterwards. That was confusing of why it can't be done before that. And that should be available to the public as well. Number two, the entire development should only be 2 stories. 3 stories obviously will block the sun. There's concerns of people looking into our yards and things like that. The developer has been great in saying, oh, okay, I'll do 2 stories along Iron King Drive. But, I have to think of my other neighbors. There was another neighbor at the meeting that asked, oh, hey, what about on this side where I live? Can we do 2 stories there? And he wasn't willing to do that. I just wanted it clear that the neighbors in the community, that was our biggest deal breaker, was that we want 2 stories all the way across. And just wanted that crystal clear. Number 3, the AUDs, we haven't talked about, nobody's talked about that, but basically the House Bill 82 of last year was the law that was passed so that no cities could restrict AUDs. So basically basement apartments, or what he's proposing is an apartment on the first floor and two stories above that. When I reviewed the bill and the comments about that, it was clear that it was to help the housing crisis, and it was geared more towards renters finding affordable places to live. I feel like the way that this is proposed is a loophole to make these 3-story complexes that have been told that will be like $550,000, $600,000. And I feel like that's taking advantage of first-time home owners that are expected to be accepted on those loans only under the conditions that they will have those tenants, which doesn't seem good. Also, part of that bill, there was a lot of requirements about what AUD units could have. One of them was that they have to be 6,000 square feet or over, which is about 0.14 acres. There's a lot of other rules and things. I understand in the MDA, all of these rules can be changed and you can do whatever you want. But I encourage you to say these rules need to be in place. We're going to follow the state recommendations, all of those kinds of things. Number 4, just to echo what Jared said, the number of units, the density, everyone doesn't like the density. My biggest concern is the amount of cars that's going to put on the road. If you have 2 people in the main house having a car, 1 person at least in the apartment having a car, that's 350 cars that's going to be going onto 126 South. That is going to be, that's the main travel path, designated travel path for where Bastion Elementary is. And my final point is, I do feel like there's a conflict of interest here. As Heather pointed out, she kind of asked that if this is going to be a separate MDA from the auto mall. I understand the auto mall is important, but I really strongly recommend that you consider these 2 different things separately. I would encourage the Planning Commission to recommend the council to publicly acknowledge that they will do what's best for this land in particular, and not just because of concerns of losing the auto mall. And that would definitely make my concerns feel better. Once again, that's approve the soil plan, have a soil plan released to the public, 2 stories for all units, basement AUDs following all the state laws, number of units under 75, and that no conflict of interest, separate MDAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
My name's Kenneth Olson, and I own the 7.5 acres that's between the east parcel that they're looking at doing the zone change and what used to be Terramere. So it's a rectangle parcel that goes back. So to have viable commercial, it's all about visibility, location, and access. And the corner there is a lot more viable prime commercial than my property would be. My property used to be zoned for multifamily. In fact, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars cleaning it up to meet the residential standard, getting rid of the lead and arsenic. And then mine got turned to commercial. So mine would be more conducive to the residential than the prime commercial corner, which has all the visibility from both. And then my property is a little further from the intersection, which allows the engineers tell us for right in, right out, or full interchange that can go both ways. So the properties really need to have connectivity from Main Street through my property and up to 126. But I'm not opposed to it. I just think that it shouldn't be done in a vacuum and spot zoned. If the prime commercial corner should go to multifamily, mine should go back to multifamily as well. And it should be planned together so it all flows and works. And thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Philip Bates, and I live on Iron King. So the biggest concern I had coming up with this development on the residential for the odd shape, the 15 acres there, the biggest concern is knowing that 126 will be a main travel lane for Olympia Hills. The biggest concern I have is my parents lived on 62 in Bangerter, so they had eminent domain, tons of homes were taken out. So my concern is now focused on that. If we build high-density homes on 126, is that road going to be wide enough for long-term when we see this huge city get developed out west, that being the main thing? Are we going to have to come back and take our tax dollars and now buy all those brand-new homes that were developed? Just want to take that in consideration as far as right along that 126. Unfortunately, as a developer, he's looking at it as just quick cash. Building homes, he's not looking long term. Is that road going to have to be widened? Are we going to have to take those homes out in the next 10 years? So just please consider that.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back up. Appreciate it.
Well, I don't know if there's much else to say. Thank you, everybody that came out. I just wanted to make sure someone was representing the citizens of Harriman in this meeting, but looks like we got a big turnout and really educated citizens that are thinking about, a lot of things here. So I just want to thank them for coming out. A lot of things that they touched on. My property is Legato Court, so my backyard is the northern eastern part of that development, which I believe is going to be blocked now by what is proposed, a 3-story apartment building. Question, is this going to be regular housing or Section 8 subsidized? Do you know?
We don't know. We're just taking comments right now.
Okay.
That's something that'll come down the road
That's something that I
later
think
on.
about. On this corner, there are at least 3 other apartment complexes within half a mile, one of them being Section 8 housing. So if any developer can come in and amend or whatever to Section 8 housing, just, like the other apartment complex, then all these other people come from South Salt Lake into Harriman. What does that do to our city? When they're living off the government, living in Section 8 housing, right next to someone with an $800,000 house that they built and they worked their whole life for. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking about. Property values and all that kind of stuff. But also, everything else that everybody else has been talking about. We need commercial. Where are my kids gonna work? You know? There's nowhere to work. So that's what I'm thinking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, name again, please.
My name is Austin Maxwell, and I live on Legato Court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brenda Mortensen, and I also live on Iron King Drive. Just something that just keeps coming to me as I'm sitting here is Larry Myler has said over and over that he needs the dirt on that triangle piece of land to fill in for the auto mall. And it's my understanding that he says if he can't get that dirt, that he will stop the auto mall. And I feel like he's threatening Harriman City by saying, I won't give you the auto mall if you don't give me what I want. And he's told us as citizens, well, fine, leave it residential and I'll build a 45, or leave it commercial and I'll build a 45 to 50-foot building on top of that mound of dirt and just see how you like that. And I don't appreciate the fear tactics and the scare tactics he has used. And I feel like if he needs that dirt, it could stay commercial and he could still move the dirt to the auto mall and put commercial buildings on that land, which is what our city really needs. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other comments, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. I do want to thank you all for the decorum that you issued as you came up and gave those comments. Thank you very much for that as well. Michael, just a quick procedural. I think we do allow the applicant an opportunity to come up and
Yes.
provide any discussion. Yes. So Larry, if you want to come up, we'll give you a couple minutes to address any of the comments that you may have heard tonight.
I'm wondering if, as we've listened to the neighbors, there are questions in your minds that I could address, quickly and use my time best for you. Is that a better way to go?
Either way.
Then have me randomly speak on things.
Is there any questions then again for the applicant now that you've heard any of the comments from the public?
I'm just curious why you're not interested in having commercial, why you want residential.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm just wondering why you're interested in having residential and not commercial on these properties.
So I'm very interested in having commercial. That's why we're bringing an auto mall and doing about 14 retail pads on 126th. We're very interested in commercial.
What about on these two properties?
Yeah, so you're talking about on Main Street?
Both of them.
That we're talking about.
Yeah. So for us, we're looking at making a viable project. We came on board at the behest of the city. We've spent $26 million preserving and maintaining and assembling the auto mall. And so as a part of that, we needed a runway. We need some way of making this work. And so we proposed that we have some commercial in the mix of projects that we're doing. I'm not saying these aren't commercially viable areas. I think the part west of Main Street is more viable than the 15 acres. But we needed to have a mix of uses and a mix of opportunities to have some income, give us a runway, help us make this work long-term for the auto mall. So we've been talking to the city's staff and council about this for a long, long time. This is the plan that works. I'm sorry to hear some of the things I heard about what we're doing. We certainly didn't say, if we don't get this, we'll build 45 feet on top of the mound, so there. No, that's not what we said. So I hate to see those things come up as though we did. What we said was, right now it's C2 zone. The contaminated soil is not contaminated enough to prevent commercial, so commercial can be built on top of that. The height restriction goes to 45 feet, so that could happen. We don't have a plan to do it. We're not threatening to do it, but that could happen on the site. We did not say, if you don't give us this, that's what we're going to do. That didn't happen. So we do like commercial. We're bringing commercial. We're bringing more commercial than any developer has ever done for the city of Harriman. And as a part of that mix, we're trying to make it work time-wise. We're trying to make it work financially. And so that's why in these sites, we're moving them to residential if we can. We think that's a good mix for what we're doing. So bringing an auto mall, which is the best tax generator for any city in the state, we think is a big deal. We think that's good commercial. And we think in the mix of things, that should be considered. I think that's not being considered by as many people as are just looking at the two sites alone. And I understand that. If you live next to either one of those, I would be looking at that one site myself, no question about it. But we've tried to work with the neighbors. We've listened to them. We want to have more meetings. We've heard some things that they've said, and we've tried to make modifications to the plan so that this would fit better and be something that would work. And I think we're not done with that process. We want to have more meetings and continue talking about it. So, a long-winded answer to your question. Any other questions?
Well, another thought along those lines, this is just the start of a long process. There's still master development agreements, there's still city council meetings, this is a long ways from, this is the first step. So, moving forward. So, just more of a...
I have a question. So you mentioned that the soil would be okay for commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had soil tests done?
We have. And we have a soil movement plan being done right now, which would come to the city for approval. And we've offered to make that public information so that all the citizens could watch the removal process with that removal document in hand. And we would like to have everyone watching this. We want it to be a very safe process. So we could build on it. Interestingly, on the dirt, the city got some bids, and it was $5 or $6 million to move the dirt to a place that would accept it, because it does have some toxicity to it. The toxicity level would preclude anyone from building residential on it as it sits, but it wouldn't preclude building commercial. It doesn't rise to that level. There's a different threshold for residential and commercial toxicity. So when the auto mall came up, and we don't have to have the dirt on the 15 acres for the auto mall. I'm sorry, that came across. That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. We don't have to have that dirt for the auto mall. However, the city got a bid for $5+ million to move the toxic soil elsewhere, and that's not feasible. The city couldn't do it. And so we said, well, hang on a second. We've done measurements of how much soil we're going to need on the auto mall and how much soil is contaminated and needs to be removed from the 15 acres. And we realized that rather than try to move it 30 or 40 miles at a huge expense, this is kind of the one opportunity to move the soil a little bit more reasonably from a financial standpoint. The city couldn't do it. We can, because we're moving in a block. And it's the distance that really eats up the dollars when you're transporting dirt. So this is something that we can do when the city couldn't do it. And we can't make it work if we keep that commercial. Financially, we can't pay, because although it's not $5+ million for us to move it just a block, it's $3+ for us to move it that block. So it becomes feasible with residential with this density. It is not feasible with any other density that we would use residentially. It is feasible commercially because we could build on the mound and we don't have to remove the soil. So that would work. We just don't think it's a good commercial location. It's surrounded on 3 sides by single-family homes. We think it's a single-family home project. And we have the opportunity to kind of put it in an envelope and not have cars go from this project into adjacent neighborhoods. The cars would largely go on 126th to Mountain View Corridor and back. That's most of where this traffic would go, rather than into neighborhoods. So we've looked at all of this. We're trying to do the best we can. We've got some great feedback from the neighbors. We've made commitments regarding that feedback that we will try to, we will absolutely adhere to. And I suspect those conversations we'll continue going and we'll continue getting ideas from residents that we can adopt as well.
So question for you. So let's say the land remains commercial, the 15 acres. So if you didn't move the contaminated soils to the auto mall, you'd still have to bring in dirt for the auto mall, is that correct?
We would bring in some. We have an opportunity to grade some that's out there to fill in some of what needs to be filled in. So we would do that, but if we don't grade the high points down that far, we can accept this soil and get rid of it from the residential, what might be a residential site, and put it onto the auto mall. There are 3 primary areas where we can put the soil. One is the UDOT, what was UDOT detention basin. And then on the northwest corner, there's a bit of a depression and dip that could take a lot of soil. And then along 126th, there are several feet that could be put in near the edge. So we can accept this soil and make it work. We would bring in less soil if we didn't have access to this soil because it's toxic and we want to get rid of it and move it into a place where we can, deal with it from a development standpoint. So.
Any other questions for Larry? No, sorry, from the Planning Commission. Public hearing is closed at this time, so it'll just be, sorry, sir, we can't.
I'd be happy to answer any questions outside after the meeting.
Well, and there will be other, there are still 2 more items up for public comment, so we can take some comments at that time as well. But right now, we're just want to discuss the general plan, the proposed general plan amendment. So there's other zoning discussions we can talk about. Sorry, Larry, one more.
On the planning side, I was very interested to hear Mr. Olson, who is another neighbor, but also commercial.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, with Mr. Olson. Sorry, maybe excuse me, sir. Sir. Shh. Sir. Okay. I was very interested to hear Mr. Olson's comments, and it sounds like there might still be some early stages of planning between your commercial property and his commercial property, and how those might work together. And so I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
This doesn't work on the screen, but if we can get
Go back to the Main Street.
Yeah, the Main Street parcel, if we can get that up there, I can walk you through this. I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Olson said.
There you go.
Ooh.
Hold on. She's turning it on for you so you can draw on the screen. Okay, we can all see what you're pointing
So
at.
we've talked, Mr. Olson and I have spoken over the past few years, and we've talked about possibilities of joining the properties together and making something work. And we haven't been able to come to terms. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're moving ahead with our plan and our proposals so that we can make this all work. One thing I did talk to Mr. Olson about was we will probably need to, and also we would like to, put in a road from Main Street that runs through our property, allows access to him, and then he can take it out at a point that makes sense to Harriman Boulevard. There's also an opportunity for him to join the street that's to the north of him to come in. So we've talked through that as a possibility, and we certainly, on our property on the east side, would be very willing, and in fact, I think from a site plan standpoint, we would have to put in that road to give access to what otherwise would be a semi-landlocked piece for Mr. Olson, which we're not in the habit of doing that to neighbors.
Did everybody follow? Sorry, there was a technical difficulty. Everybody follow what he was talking about? There's the.
So I did it on the screen, but it didn't.
But it didn't show up for us. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. It didn't show up here. I don't know if our monitors are different than those. It's still not showing up here.
It didn't show up on our monitor, but I can.
Well, we can see it up here.
We've got it. So
we can see it up here.
So yeah, we would come off of Main across our property to give him access from the east and then down to Harriman Boulevard. He also has a stub-in road to the north from that neighborhood to come in if it makes sense for his development. So there will be 3 access points for Mr. Olson, and we would certainly work as a neighbor with him to help him out. If we could combine both properties, Mr. Olson and our team could certainly make a more cohesive site plan out of this. There's no question about that. But at this point in time, with our plan remaining separate from his, this is something that we can do. And it wouldn't hurt our site plan. We could work with that road bifurcating our property. Thanks for the question.
Anything else, Brother? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll go ahead and, before I turn it over, there was a couple questions I wanted to just bring up that came up from the public as well. There was a discussion about 126 South, if it was sized appropriately for the future development, and engineering here is are here as well, but I'll try and explain it maybe, or if you want to come up. But either way, 126 South has been planned and size set aside so that when the demand is there, that can be improved without impacting. There was a discussion of eminent domain, another interchange on Bangor. That would not need to happen. There is enough setback on that road based from the transportation master plan that's been done, so there would not be any of those impacts coming forward. There was a discussion, I don't know how to answer it. As a planning commission, we don't deal at all with the whole financial side of it. So there was the discussion about whether the city owns the Crescent shape or not. We recognize they do, but for us, we look at the best interest of the city. We don't get involved in the financial side, so just keep that in mind as questions are coming up. That's city council. Our interests are the interests of the city regardless of the financial side of it. So that's out of the picture for us. We don't know what's happening with who owns it, what agreements have taken place. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. So any further discussion from the commission?
Yeah, so one of the problems that I have with this proposal on the Crescent area is the proposal to move the contaminated soil down the road. I feel like we're just kind of throwing the ball down the street and not really solving the problem. I think if we're going to even consider just having this be residential, I think that should be properly cleaned up. And then
maybe a quick discussion on that as well, that particular item.
Yeah.
So that has not been, right? There's still a plan or a study going on what to do with that. My personal thought is I like the idea of getting it out of there and getting it to a more of a commercial site that can be capped or whatever with the large parking lots from an auto mall and take care of that. I think that's a great situation. I think personally, if it can, I don't particularly like the density going in there that's being proposed, but if there's a way, we recognize that there was a financial thing, and again, we don't deal with finances, but if there's got to be some type of agreement, I think we can come up with the city to be able to get that material to the auto mall and disconnect some of the financial situations, or maybe some type of partnership to get that cleaned up. That's my thoughts. I don't know if there's any discussion more on that contaminated soils, and we'll get to some other points for you, Heather.
I suppose,
Go ahead.
excuse me, my quality mask is broken. So. I suppose if we were reviewing this as a preliminary or concept, we'd have all kinds of ideas and options. But since this is a discussion on the general plan, and sir, I can't consider this as a single project. These are three separate properties we're talking about. It's my opinion. I do understand the want for space. We all would like elbow room, and I would love my kids to have that elbow room, but I also understand the need for affordability. With all that said, I'm obligated, my responsible charge is to protect the city to the best of my knowledge and best of my ability, and then to watch out for the public. And as I consider everything that's been presented to us, personally, I don't have the information on the soils, although I've heard from one viewpoint the soils aren't so bad as to prohibit commercial, and from another viewpoint, well, we're doing a soils test, so you can't have it both ways. You're either doing one or it's been done. So I don't feel like I have enough information to support a general plan change at this time.
I think that
Yeah, one of my concerns, and we've heard everything that you guys have said, and we appreciate all your interaction and your feedback. One of my concerns is that as Harriman struggles with its growth, which is what we are doing because we're growing so fast, there's this competition between both creating housing that's affordable and also creating enough housing for everyone that's here while maintaining the livelihood and the feel of Harriman itself. And so I think that to maintain that, it's very important to maintain the commercial plots that we already have. We don't have a lot of plots. If you look at the Harriman City plan, the general plan, we don't have a lot of commercial lots set aside. And over the past couple of years, more and more commercial lots have been going to residential. I think that the Crescent area, that definitely there is a possibility there that could be residential. But my feeling is on the other one, the 5078 West, 12560 lot, that's in the middle of a commercial area. It's designated as commercial, and to change it just to a residential, I think we could accomplish both things. Maintain the commercial on the ground floor and go with residential on the second or third floor, going with a mixed-use vertical application. That kind of allows us to do both things at the same time. Maintain the commercial aspect of that ground floor while also giving that additional lower priced housing, because $500,000, I don't know about many people that get out of college, first time home buyers that can kind of support that kind of mortgage. It's not going to happen. So those are my thoughts. My thought is general plan wise, the Crescent property, I kind of wish that you hadn't showed us the plan because that plan needs a lot of work, in my opinion. But that's not what we're reviewing here today. We're reviewing the opportunity for it to change from commercial to residential. And so on my part, I have real concerns about the 5078 property. I think that needs maintained.
Let me,
commercial.
maybe I'll jump in on that.
Yeah, well, real quick, I think he brings up a good point. We probably need to keep this focused on the general plan discussion that's going on. So thank you for that. Go ahead.
And that's where I'm headed with the
Yeah.
Main Street property.
Yeah.
I think the Main Street property, the more we talk about it, I think it's intertwined with the Olson property. And when we're planning for one, we're planning for the other. And so without any proposal on the other, it kind of holds it. I think it holds it up. Or I think we need to consider both. And it sounds like if we were to transfer it to residential, the first thing is Mr. Olson would be in here the next day asking to change his as well.
Yeah.
And so we lose a lot of commercial as soon as we do that. And so I think with them being intertwined, we either need to keep it commercial or just not go that direction. Or perhaps there's a mixed use in between if there's some further development coming down the road between those groups.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jackson.
I would like to make a comment too. I know we spent a lot of time on our existing general plan. We have commercial slated for both of these areas. We do have some major developments coming in, and Harriman Boulevard will become more of a viable commercial area over time. So that's what I feel about those two areas is sometimes it takes a while to get commercial, but we need to plan for the future and just not what should we put there now today. When it comes to commercial, like around the city hall, we did, we tried to be creative and did live work units. And as far as I've seen, I don't see any businesses that are utilizing those on the work aspect. So for me, creating places, like one gentleman said, for their kids to have a place to work in the future, or just other employment centers is very much needed in our city. And I usually go out of the city to spend my money today.
So my concern is giving up 3 viable commercial properties. I couldn't in good conscience vote for that.
Okay.
I share a similar view on all of this. Looking at our general plan, and just having put in more than a year of work reviewing that. One of the things that we were definitely lacking was commercial, and giving up these 2 areas, in my opinion, would be detrimental to our city.
Well, maybe one piece to look at as we talk, when we reviewed the transportation master plan not long ago, they talked about how big it's going to get there at 126 South when that's a full freeway and the 126 South off-ramp.
You're talking to Mountain View.
Yeah,
Mountain View and 126.
Mountain
Right.
View and 126 is going to become a very big intersection, and there's going to be a lot of traffic there. And so, and the way it ties into Main Street, there'll be a lot of viability as far as traffic coming and going for commercial property.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, that's maybe one thing to consider as we look at this.
Maybe we can go back to the slide that showed you had summarized kind of the the procedural things that we could look at tonight, some of the different things, We can, as a part of this, we can recommend it as is, we can recommend it or deny it, recommend denial of this. We could recommend changes to what's being proposed as well, or we could continue this. That's kind of where we're at tonight as we're looking through these and we've heard comment. I just want to bring this back to our attention. This is kind of our options for actions tonight. I don't know if we're ready or to this point or not. I don't know if there's been enough discussion, but this is where we need to get to. But any other thoughts on any of these proposed actions that maybe have some discussions on what we could do tonight with these, if there's any recommendations, or we don't have to do a motion yet, but maybe talk about what maybe some thoughts are with these.
For me, looking at these options, the option of deny the proposal is not consistent with the general plan and zoning policies of the city just rings true.
Is that a motion?
No, this is discussion. This is discussion yet. We're not making any motions as of yet. And again, I guess a thought for myself, the item at 5452 West, the property there. Personally, I think residential would be a good fit for that one. However, the medium density is not conducive. My thoughts are it needs to match what is in the area already if it was to go to residential. And so that's a thought that I had for that particular parcel, regardless of, if we decide to recommend that to be residential, we could make an amended to that particular one. I personally agree that the property at 5078 should remain commercial. I think that is a great location for commercial. But
could the medium density residential on the Crescent property be considered a good buffer between the lower density and the higher speed traffic that's going to be on 126?
I worry about long-term with the traffic, the in and out of that area, just with the way that road curves. That's my concern, and especially if we're gonna have 6 lanes there, because that's the plan, right, 6?
Come on up and talk. Blake, I know you prepared some information. Go ahead and talk a little bit about 126, traffic of commercial versus residential on that parcel, things like that.
So we're working through our transportation master plan update right now because Olympia was approved, and that was always the plan.
Yeah.
We've been looking at the volumes, and the volumes on that road planned for 2050, I believe are right around 40,000 vehicles per day. And those volumes were planned with the commercial use on that property. So the commercial use on that property, as far as we can tell, is about 4 to 5 times what the residential use would generate on it, because just the way the traffic generation models are set up. So that road is planned to go to possibly 7 lanes. We're waiting on our transportation master plan update to come back and verify that. That right-of-way or that cross-section has larger park strips for that purpose and large shoulders. So there would be no additional right-of-way, but there might be a need to push the curbs out so that we would have bike lanes to accommodate those lanes as well. So does that answer your question on that? There's the way that angle's set up as people leave the neighborhood, you do have some sight distance. No, I don't see any sight distance issues as you leave because of the way that curvature. The other side of the street would have sight distance issues because you're looking back around the corner. So those have been looked at, and the frontage along it would allow for 2 accesses. And per fire code, you'd have to have 2 accesses in and out of that neighborhood.
Whether it was commercial or residential, right? Either way.
Yep. So residential for single-family homes like that have been proposed here, you need to have 2 accesses if you have more than 30 homes per fire code. So, okay. Any other questions while I'm up here?
Maybe. So right now it's C2, and in our draft plan, we have it as neighborhood commercial. Does that change the projections for traffic? That different designation?
That's a good question. We did not look at the neighborhood commercial. I didn't look and see what uses are in there. I'm not familiar with what the uses are. The uses we were looking at were for 15 acres, you could fit a fast food restaurant with a drive-through, which is the worst case scenario, which you'd be looking at. That one use of a 2,000 square foot restaurant is equivalent to 100 single family homes. And then if you put a grocery store on there, say like a 30,000 square foot grocery store to fit on that lot, then that's where you get the 4 to 5 times the use if you combine those two together. You're expecting probably an average of about 1,000 trips per day for the 110 homes that we've heard might go on there. And peak hour, the PM peak hour is the driver, and that is, what was that, Josh, about 400 peak hour trips in that 1 hour, or was it? No, for the residential? Oh, residential is 92 trips in that one peak hour. It was the grocery store that was 400 peak hour trips.
And I would suspect a neighborhood commercial would be probably in between the two. It wouldn't be as less as the residential, but it would be definitely less than the commercial. So I would suspect to be somewhere in between.
Depending on the use. Now,
Exactly.
If neighborhood commercial puts a fast food restaurant or a C-store in there, then you're
That's
seeing
right.
that, but
Then you're done.
So I'm not familiar with what uses were allowed in that proposed neighborhood commercial. That's a great question.
What kind of limits will there be on curb cuts due to the amount of traffic on 126 in the future?
Sorry.
What kind of limits will there be on curb cuts?
So the access, as you mentioned,
access
too,
Oh,
that's all you would allow, right?
So it's driven by, there's an access into the neighborhood across the street, so you have to have some offsets with that, and then it's based on the size of the road. So I think it's 300 feet from that center line of that intersection each way is the closest you could put an access road in. And then if they wanted to exceed that, you'd have to do a traffic study, and they'd have to come in and show that it could be closer. And usually when they would propose that, then there would be discussion about medians or some other mechanism, right in, right out, things like that to make it safe so that you don't have someone pulling out of one neighborhood and pulling out of the other one and going in the middle lane and hitting each other.
So would it look a lot like 134th does now between Bangerter and Mountain View?
If they wanted to push the accesses closer than what's allowed by the ordinance, then yes, it could possibly be something like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Blake. All right. Any other thoughts on the zoning change is the top one here. The proposed zoning change is medium density residential for 5452 and high density residential for 5078. So any other discussions on those?
I'm still in the camp. I see Harriman Boulevard as being viable for commercial. I know the city has limited commercial, therefore all commercial to me is prime, and I just hate losing it.
I feel the same way.
Does anyone want to, are we ready for a motion? Any other thoughts? Looks like others.
Let me
Go
bounce
ahead.
one other idea.
Yeah.
If we were to choose the continue to a future meeting, or sorry, I'm probably not loud enough. If we were to choose the continue to a future meeting, there might be able to be some additional information generated in regards to the planning on the Main Street property at least.
Well, and that's a good point, because the continuation is not going to slow down what's happening with these properties, is my understanding, because we don't even have the master development agreement. There's, that's still to be negotiated, still to be worked through. So there is time. We don't necessarily have to take an action and take that to the city council. And if we do take an action, the city council may sit on it until they do see a master development agreement as well. Just the fact that we take an action tonight doesn't mean that the city council is going to immediately do something with that as well. So personally, I guess it doesn't hurt. We could continue this item. It would come back. We'd probably see another public hearing as a part of it if we did continue it, if we wanted to hear more opportunities for that. So that is an option, and that's not going to necessarily hinder at this time because it's not critical.
My only issue is if we feel that it shouldn't be residential, then we're
kicking the can down the road.
kicking the can down the road, and then
and that's fine too.
And then making the developer feel like investing more into this holistic plan with all the properties being seen as a master plan versus these two properties that we have in front of us today.
Well, and I guess part of my thought in pushing it down the road is, could a mixed-use situation work? Is there some, and which Forrest alluded to earlier, is there some possibilities with a mixed-use designation instead of just strictly residential?
Which I think when we had our work meeting, the client basically just said no.
Yeah, the developer
just said no
for it. Yeah.
Right, he said it would be very difficult to do that, and I don't know if that accomplishes any reduction in the 3 stories in the height. Mike, the future MDA, just for clarity again, one MDA to cover all 3 of these properties.
That's been my understanding. Of course, it's early
Still
in the development
negotiations,
process, and it could change, but it's my understanding it's been one document that was in.
Or even if it does, though, these 2 properties come to the commission and to the council as separate projects. They don't come together as one, right?
Well, the way the applications were submitted, we are entertaining 2 different parcels as part of the general plan request. And then we have 2 separate zoning applications for this separate zoning request. It just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah.
Michael, will you remind us who works on the MDAs, who puts those together?
So primarily our senior staff, Chase, our city attorney, Chase Andresi, our city attorney, is heavily involved. The city council last week discussed this potential MDA as well as 2 others that we have received applications for. And they have established working groups, and they will begin meeting, I believe it's weekly, to discuss these draft MDAs. And so, yes, senior staff and even members of the city council, select members of the city council will participate because, of course, like you, they are also limited as to how many can meet without constituting a quorum or a meeting. So they have to limit their participation, but they will also be involved.
Thank you.
And again, it's a recommendation. We could give this over. We don't know what discussions have been happening with city council. That's, again, not our purview. This is just, we make the action and the city council can do with it as they see fit. A lot of times they do take our recommendations, and we've got a good relationship, don't get me wrong, with the city council, things like that. We've got a good rapport. And so I think they do respect our decisions and what our recommendations are.
If the commission were to elect to table this item, of course, we always ask you to provide direction to both the staff and potentially the applicant to see what additional information you're looking for in order to address or answer any of your concerns. Relative to the general plan amendment itself, I was just reviewing city code, which I believe we have referenced previously. When the city council is going to determine this general plan amendment, there is, it's called 1056 General Decision Making Standards. And it reads, that the city council shall determine what action in its judgment will reasonably promote the public interest, conserve the value of property, avoid incompatible development, encourage appropriate use and development, and promote the general welfare. So if you feel like there's any of those kind of statements that you feel like you need additional information in order to make a decision, a recommendation based on those objectives, that's what we would like you to identify. Admittedly, that is the standard that the council will be using for their decision. The ordinance doesn't specify that that is the basis for planning commission's review tonight. But I think that's reasonable to anticipate that that's the kind of information that we should have on the public record as part of the city's decision-making.
I just wonder if it's helpful for us to make a vote and let the council know before the MDA is drafted.
It's a good point, too. There's still a lot to be done with the MDA. If we are to, again, as Michael brought up, if we are to continue it, we need to have those two sub-bullets identified. And it could be, right, we need more information on the MDA. We need more information on the cleanup of the soil. We need more information on working with adjacent property owners to, combine zoning or whatever changes that may be happening. So anyhow, keep that in mind as you're...
In my opinion, I don't feel like I need additional information. I think that everything that's been presented for this specific item for the general plan land use, I've received what I needed to receive. And for me, changing the zone, is not...
Not the zone,
The
but
general plan.
The general plan, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Is not in the best interest of the city. So I'm ready to make a motion.
Go for it.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Okay, I'll make a motion on item 3.3 to deny the proposal. It is not consistent with the general plan and zoning policies of the city.
I'll second that.
All right, we got a motion by Heather, and I heard Andrea speaking up first, so I will let Andrea have the second. We will go ahead, and again, this is a vote to deny the proposal. So anything more? So anyhow, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Jackson?
I'll say yes.
Okay. So that is will go before the city council as a denial for item 3.3 for the general plan change. Thank you. All right. Good discussion. We'll go ahead and move on. Now, again, for benefit, this is a zoning change. I don't know. I guess we still need to go through the process here. Even though we did deny or recommend denial for the first one. We'll go ahead and go through this process, but this is again for zoning change. So it's almost procedural, I think, at this point, but nonetheless, there will be an opportunity for public hearing, and we can get to that. Let Clint speak first, and then I can have some more discussion there.
All right, well, I've appreciated the conversation so far tonight. So just to explain a couple of things to the commission and to the public that's here, zoning takes place in a couple of different layers. The first one, as we talked about, was the general plan, and that is kind of the base. That's the long-term plan for the city. As we go through this process, we involve residents and stakeholders in the city to kind of develop a long-term plan for the city, and that general plan then designates what type of zoning can take place on top of that. So although the commission, or the council, or the commission anyway, sorry, you guys have recommended denial on the general plan, that's something that the city council could still move forward with, potentially, reverse your position and approve it. So we want to look at these rezones now independently and get your recommendations on those as well. So the first one is for the property to the east. I'm not going to get too in-depth on all of this information. I feel like it's been pretty well presented and understood in terms of what we're looking at, the compliance. Just a quick overview, there's 6.36 acres that is being proposed to rezone from A1, which is its current zoning to the RM zone. Again, this would all be contingent on the general plan being amended to allow for the high-density residential to take place. Most of this here has been mentioned before. I will just remind the commission that the applicant has provided an application for the C2 property to the south of the RM we'll be seeing that here in a future meeting as well. In terms of considerations, we're looking at the general plan. Is it consistent with the provisions of the general plan? Is it in character with the surrounding properties? Again, a lot of the concerns that we've talked about are up on the screen here. Adverse effects, again, you know, a lot of this, like I said, most of this has already been talked about. And so I won't get into too much of that. And then again, here's the options for action. So are there any questions for me on any of the rezoning from the A1 to the RM zone? Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Larry, is there any discussion on the zoning change that you would like to, any additional information on this zone change application that you have, that you'd like to present at this time? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, again, we will have a public hearing on this, but again, we've heard a lot of the comments. That's not to say that we can't hear them again, but we recognize, I think you've heard what we've had to say in our discussions as well. We're happy to hear any additional information that anyone would like to bring to us, or if you want to repeat it, but I think you understand where the commission is at this time. So at that point, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for any comments. On the zone change, again, this is for the zone change. Proposed zone change for the property at 126th and Main Street. So just that one parcel.
Correct. I just wanted to point out, I submitted
Name
a
again,
grammar
sorry,
request.
even though we did, your name, please.
Oh, sorry, Andrew Lawrence. I just wanted to point out, I submitted a grammar request for any soil contamination plans. I also did email one of the developers to give me a soil report, and nobody responded to me. But I think that would be a great idea to push back until we get those reports. Thank you.
Thank you. You ended too soon. You caught me with my mouth full. I apologize. Anyone else would like to make any additional comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing for item 3.4 at this time. Again, Larry, there was a comment made. I don't know if anything more you'd like to add to his comment, just again to rebut anything for him on the soils.
I think you're being very gracious to allow a lot of time for people to talk, but in reality, in denying, obviously, the general plan amendment, there will be no chance of you going forward with zone changes for residential, right?
There's
residential zones won't be put into something in your, you know what I'm saying, so I'm...
Again, it's a recommendation. I mean, stranger things have happened, but it could happen, but...
well, I don't think it could happen that you're going to say yes to either of these, having said no to the first one. That's all I'm saying.
Likely,
so.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I
okay.
get it. That's
Thank
fine.
you. All
I
right.
understand.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Any other questions for the applicant or anything like that?
Comments on this item from?
I don't think we had any additional comments before tonight's meeting on any of the items, right? We had already received them prior to that, so yeah. So thank you, though, for that. Any other discussion? We've belabored this. I don't know if there's any.
I think
thoughts,
this,
but
just as a quick note, I think this property has a lot of potential, and I think how it works with the new piece coming in the front as well as with the neighbor, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just, I think it's got mixed up with all the rest of it.
Yeah, agreed.
So.
Yeah, and just like to the developer, I get the need to, doing residential, it is quicker to get those units out and make it profitable for the overall project. So I guess I feel for him on that piece of it and understand what the proposal is as far as from a developer's perspective in making the overall long-term project easier to digest. But I go back to what we have in our general plan, and again, long-term commercial is best for this area.
Yeah. And again, the city council can do what they feel is as well. But
I'm ready for a recommendation.
go ahead.
I recommend item 3.4, the approval for zoning map amendment be denied.
Okay, we have a motion by Darrell.
I'll second.
And a second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Jackson?
In its current form, yes.
Thank you. In its current form, yes. So that is denied unanimously, recommended for denial unanimously as well. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3.5, which is a recommendation to amend the zoning map for the crescent-shaped property. We'll go ahead and call Clinton.
Okay. Again, not going to get into too much detail. We've kind of all heard it before. A couple of things I wanted to touch base on that I think is maybe worth talking about. Just as if, oh, here we go. So, as the chair has stated tonight, the city council could go and they could make a different decision, which would allow this residential development to take place. As part of the residential development and all of its development, the MDA would be something that we'd be working on. So, not as part of a rezone, you can make zoning conditions in terms, you can regulate density and height of buildings and those kinds of things. So our recommendation from staff would to limit the north buildings to 2 stories on the north side of the property, but limit the height overall to 35 feet, which would be the same as if it was a residential development, a single-family development. That's typical in all R1 and R2 zones, as well as some of our agricultural zones. So limit the height overall to 35 feet, and these would be provisions in the MDA, not necessarily a zoning condition unless the commission or council decided to move that way, and then require a minimum, instead of the 30-foot here that I have presented on the screen, a standard rear yard setback is 25 feet. So if this property developed as a single-family neighborhood, a standard rear yard setback would be 25 feet. So we would recommend that on both the north and the east sides of the property. And these are things that could be potentially built into an MDA. And again, here's your options for action. So if there are any questions or concerns from me on this one, I'd be glad to answer them. Okay.
And again, procedurally, there is an opportunity for the applicant if he would like to make any comments. Thank you, Larry. Okay. All right, and this will be our final item up for public hearing. And again, this is just for the zoning change for the crescent-shaped parcel. So I'll go ahead at this time and open up to public hearing for the zone change. All right, seeing no comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And again, we do appreciate everybody being here, presenting your information, and letting us know your feelings. So thank you very much for that as well. Any further discussion from the commission? We'll entertain.
Maybe I'll make one more comment.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by the concept for the housing with the ADUs and as something that could make something more affordable for first-time buyers. So I encourage that somehow to be kept, but I don't know.
Well, I think the concern is the density, I think, of it as well. I think if there was a different density, we may entertain something more but the R210 and the medium density, I think, recognizing the financial significance of this. But again, maybe there's some type of partnering that can be done to maybe lower the density and help get that soil moved, or anyhow, we'll leave that up to the powers that be.
But once
to
again,
get
a
that
mixed
happen.
use. Maybe there's a mixed
Yeah,
use.
and maybe a mixed use or something, right.
Works into that.
But I think there could be a win-win situation for everybody. I think the city would like to see this site cleaned up, and I think we all would, I don't want to speak for them, but personally, as a citizen, I think it would be really good to get that site cleaned up, get that soil to a place like the Auto Mall. And so I think there could be some partnering. There should be some things that the city and the applicant can do to make that happen. So.
Right, since we're not supposed to consider economics, I would love to have, outside of economics, the soil moved to the Auto Mall and commercial built there.
Yeah.
Be a great thing for the city. I do have some reservations about the mixed use, and that would be, I can just envision a young couple going to a mortgage company and them not qualifying them unless they have a tenant.
Yeah.
I don't want to put anybody in hot water, but, getting a tenant, then all of a sudden the tenant goes and they can't afford the mortgage. So I think we need to walk into that with our eyes
This might
wide
be
open.
the only way I get my kid out of my house.
Yeah.
There you go.
Give him the basement apartment, right? Very good. All right, any other discussion from Planning Commission? All right. Daryl, were you going to make a motion? I thought I heard that.
I can.
Go ahead.
Item 3.5, recommendation of approval to amend the zoning map for the property located at 5452 West. I recommend we deny that.
Okay, we have a motion by Daryl,
I'll second that.
a second by Brody. Go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Jackson?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That again unanimously goes before a denial of that recommendation to the city council.
Can I ask when staff thinks this might be reviewed by the city council?
Pardon me? Say
Can
that
I
again.
ask when staff thinks this might be reviewed by the city council?
There is nothing set up yet for the city council on this, is my understanding. Right, the city council, there's nothing on their agenda to look at this or review any of these items at this time, is that right? We don't know.
So typically what we would do is we will forward your recommendation to the council and essentially request that it be discussed at a work meeting. The administration works with the city council in establishing their agenda. So really, the council, it's at their pleasure to decide which meeting to hear your recommendation.
Okay. And the applicant at that time would be obviously welcome to come in at that work session and have those discussions as well. Okay. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there any other comments by the commission at this time, or even staff? Michael, you looked perplexed. Okay. Go ahead, Heather.
I just have a question. What is the status of the draft general plan?
A good question.
So we have delivered, as you know, the final draft to the city council. We did have a meeting, I think it was in October or early November, I think it was October, where we talked with them specifically about several areas on the future land use map where some of our development partners were still asking for consideration and changes. So there were a couple of small changes made by the council as part of that conversation. I know that our city manager has been polling the city council asking for a date and time and a process as to how to work on the general plan. Another thing that has just happened recently is we are re-looking at some of our residential and agricultural zones, potentially even identifying some new zoning types that we would need to tie that back into our draft plan, which of course our draft plan doesn't currently recognize. So there may be a need to slow up even further the draft plan with the council in order to accommodate some of that work that the council has requested that we work on. So we're looking for direction. It's in their hands. And I know that the administration is actively trying to get that direction from the council.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Future meetings. So city council meeting on Wednesday, January 26th. Our next planning commission is Thursday, February 3rd. And then following that, another city council meeting on February 9th. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Jackson got it. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much, everybody.
Thank you all for your service tonight.